All right, well, we can go ahead and get started. So that way we can, we can see what we have. We have our expert here with us. This is Carolyn Reynolds. Not only is she a proximity teacher, but she also is an admissions expert. So, we are excited to be here this evening, and she will share some resources with us. And we are, just thrilled that she's going to share her expertise with us. So, Carolyn, whenever you're ready, take it away.
All right. So, yes, I'm Carolyn Reynolds. So I've put up a QR code and a tiny URL that is going to take you to a Google folder that has resources in it. I'm also still adding some resources to it. And I will probably keep adding resources to it. So if you want to get a copy of that, then I would go ahead and get it, and you can make your own copy even, or you can just shortcut it. But that way you have access to all of these materials. All right, so I want you to know about me because I am an admissions expert. So I have a BA in English and Secondary Education, a minor in Theater Arts, and I have a TESOL, which is Teaching English to Other Languages, Speakers of Other Languages certificate. And I also have my master's in media with an instructional technology concentration. So during the day, I work for PLI, and I work with English classes and ESOL students. And then at nights and in the summer, especially, I work with a college admissions company as a writing coach. My sole job with this company is to work with students one-on-one, getting their personal statements and their other admissions essays ready to go. I have tried to condense months of work and information into this one little hour presentation. So I would suggest when you look in the Google folder, you'll find links of resources. And I have linked several different ones that you can use. There's also templates in there, but in the list of resources, I have put the link to the company that I work with. If you are interested in getting help, they also have counselors that help you with, picking your careers and your colleges. And then I also have my own small business where I am an academic success coach. So I work with things like this for 2 of my 3 jobs that I have.
That's wonderful. Yeah, we'll definitely, share the link of the folder too for anybody who needs to watch the recording as well. So you will have access to it later, just in case you don't get a chance to bookmark it tonight.
Great. All right, so we're going to look at 2 different things. We're going to have 2 different objectives. So our first is, what is an admission essay? An admissions essay is completely different than anything you have ever done for school. So it's really important to look at it because it is a different beast entirely. We're going to look at the purpose and the expectations, and we're also going to look at some examples of prompts. That means the instructions that they give you to write about. We're also going to go over some tips and tricks that I know from working with this extensively. We are going to talk about physically typing it. We're going to talk about the tone that you use, having editors, and we're also going to talk about a timeline because, as I said, we usually work on this for months. This is not something you're going to get done in one night or even a week. So that is something to be aware of. All right, so the purpose of an admissions essay is that the schools want to know. They want to know your ability to generate and communicate ideas. It's not just about your writing. Now, while they do look at writing and they do want to see some professional academic writing, they want to see that you can use your brain to get information, not just I can find it on the internet, but I know these things and I can apply these things. So we're going to talk about that more when we look at the prompts. It's also about communication, because in your future, I mean, even now you have to communicate, but in the future, especially as an adult, when you don't have another adult to communicate for you like you do now, you need to learn how to communicate those ideas. So that is what schools are looking for. They also want to know about your growth mindset or lack of one, because they want someone who wants to improve. They want someone who wants to learn things and have personal growth. They don't want people who are just here to be here and move along. So those are the first two. And then the third one, which is a little bit different. So both of those were kind of academic. The third one is if you will fit in with the culture of their school. So every school has their own culture. They have their own focus. Sometimes it is maybe service work that they do. Maybe there's a certain type of activities that they're involved in. Maybe they are big on public speaking. Maybe they are big on volunteering with certain organizations. So they want to know if you're going to fit in with their school, for you and for them. So expectations. The expectations of these, it's a little different than your school essays. Now, like always, they want to know that you can follow directions. This is a little different than what you're used to, because they will just disregard your essay if you don't follow instructions. They will just say ignore, and they will move on. So you have to make sure that you're following directions. And the most important things with that are the word count, and also answering the prompt fully, which is something that you work with your teachers, where they want you to answer your prompt, all the pieces of the prompt. But it is even more important in this case, because they have asked you those specific questions for a reason. There's an answer they're trying to get out of you. Also, authenticity. They want to have content that you have written, and they also want a tone that is the way, not necessarily that you speak, but your style. They don't want you to try to be someone else. And a lot of times with these types of essays, people have looked at a lot of examples, and that's a little bit of a downfall, because they start trying to mimic those examples in one way or another. So it is very important that you are true to yourself. And we're going to talk about that in a little bit.
That's an excellent point.
So for these admissions essays, there are some general themes that almost every school, every scholarship program, they are going to have one of these options or all of these options. So the first one is sharing your story. So a lot of these are about your identity. So it is things that make you you. And they want to hear a story. All of these are going to be a narrative, because this is a personal narrative. It is a statement of showing how you have learned things and showing how you're going to use them in the future. So sharing your story is about your identity. Learning from obstacles. These colleges want to know that if you have a problem, that you can try and solve it, that you have the wherewithal, the initiative to say, I am having trouble in this class, and I know that they have tutoring for this class. They want to know that you can go out of your way to do that, because they're not going to hold your hand the way that we usually do in the schools for public school. They also want to see how you're going to apply that to your future. All of these, you're going to want to talk about the past, the present, and the future. And that is for any admissions essay. So, challenging a belief. They are not saying that you have to have chained yourself to the gate of the zoo because you are protesting them having the animals in cages. It doesn't have to be that big, because they want to know something authentic about you. You don't have to have an invention that they are using on the space station that you made. You don't have to have run a marathon barefooted. So often people think that they have to write about something like that. That's not what they want to hear. If they wanted things like that, they can watch a movie. They can read a book, because the people who've done those things are already documented somewhere else. They want to hear about you. I have a student who he wrote about challenging his own belief about how people who come from lower income areas are interested in coding, because he thought they wouldn't be interested in coding classes. And he learned through offering a coding class in a low income area that that's not how that works. And he said it opened up his eyes. And so that's what he wrote his about. So it doesn't have to be something outside. It doesn't have to be that you challenged your parents about, you know, their religion or anything like that. It can be something as small as just changing your own beliefs. All right, so solving a problem. This is kind of the same as learning from obstacles. It's just a little bit different because they'll want to know about a specific problem. It's just like in a job interview when they say, tell about a problem that you had and how you solved it. That is asked in almost every single interview, no matter where you are going, no matter what kind of job it is. Personal growth is the one that kind of encapsulates all of them, but they want to see how your past experiences have turned you into the person you are today, and what you plan to do with what you know today to help you in your future, whether that's college or after college. They want to know that you are, like we talked about, the growth mindset. They want to know that you plan on keeping going forward. You're going to keep taking baby steps and you're going to get better at things. If you know that communication isn't a strong suit of yours, but you are a better communicator today than you were in kindergarten, you could write your story about how in kindergarten at open house, you were too scared to talk to your teacher. And now you email them to introduce yourself before school even starts. How are you going to take that into the future? I'm going to initiate conversation with authority figures because I know that they can help me succeed, and I want to offer them my assistance. 6 is a fun one because 6 is what captivates you, what makes you lose track of time. So most people have something for this, even if you think that you don't, you do. I have had students write about all kinds of things. I have had students talk about video games, which I think a lot of people could, but there are people who talked about ice skating. I have had all kinds of things. And that one is fun. That one is definitely because you get to talk about the thing that you love. So it's very fun to do. Now, there is always a number 7, and I call it the dreaded number 7 because it's a topic of your choice. I'm going to go ahead and say to you, before we even look at these prompts, you don't want to do the one that's a topic of your choice or an essay that you wrote for something else or however they phrased it, because they have crafted their writing prompt to get, like I said, specific information out of you. You may not necessarily get to all of those pieces of information if you're creating your own topic. So what I have students do, I've had a couple of students in the past few years who've done that, but by the time that we made it kind of match with everything else, they realized, especially with, it's a topic of your choice, sharing your story, it can fall under that. And so they realized that really anything that's about you can be in those 6. So that's just something to think about, because you don't want to turn in a paper on the grapes of wrath for this. I don't think y'all read Grapes of Wrath anymore, but that's what my dad always did. For every book he got to pick a book, and every report he did the Grapes of Wrath. So you don't want to no, because he knew it, and so he did it. And so you don't want to do that. You don't want to turn in an essay about something random, because you need to make sure it's showing who you are. All right, so we're going to go through this, and you're going to see a pattern, because we're going to talk about what not to write about. We do not want to write about anything that is cliche, which just means that it's common. These people, a lot of times, either that is their full-time job and that's what they do, or they're at least college professors who were on this panel who read these things, every summer or whenever they look at them. So we want to avoid certain things that we already know they're getting a lot of. So for all of these, it's because that they are hearing too much of it. But there are also some other reasons, and we're going to go through these for some of them, because some of them you're going to be surprised. Especially if you read books and watch movies about people and their triumphs and things, you're going to see some of those pop up in this. We don't want to be doing it. So the first one is a resume of your life and achievements. Especially parents like to have you list all of the things that you've ever done, the awards you got in kindergarten, second grade, and fourth grade. But they have already asked you for all that information on your application. So you are not giving them any new information when you're doing that. It also tends to look like you're bragging, or it's some things that really aren't, I'm going to say it, they aren't as special as you think that they are. Some people like to write about things like being the president of a club in their school. Unless you have specific stories of something amazing that you did, then you don't want to write about something like that. You don't want to say, I was the president of 4 different clubs, but you can't tell us about the leadership, what you learned from it. If all you're going to do is say, I was the president of X, Y, and Z club, that's not helpful to them. They want to see you, not just a list of what you've done. They want to see you. All right, number 2 makes people angry with me sometimes. So we're going to discuss it. Sports injury, challenge, or success. I'm going to be honest with y'all. Everyone writes about it. Everyone, any student athlete has a story about a time that they broke something, tore something, sprained something. They had trouble getting to the meet on time. They didn't have their shoes for the meet, and so they had to borrow some from someone else. They won the big game. We're proud of you. It is a good story, but you don't want to use it for this one, because anyone who has ever torn their ACL is going to write about how they tore their ACL. It is not going to show who you are. Now, all of these have a caveat of unless there's just something absolutely tremendous. But for those, I would make sure you're working with a coach, or you ask someone, is this a unique story? Because we don't want to be one more sports injury story that we're going to read. So that is that one. I also say avoid it because the movies. There are so many movies out that talk about, sports setbacks of one kind or another, that it is really hard to have a unique story that's not going to sound like you watched that movie before you wrote it. All right, tragedy. This is another one just like that it is not that anyone has an issue with you going through that. It's not that people are not proud of you, but that's not how you want to introduce yourself to these people. The examples that they give from College Vine are death, divorce, and abuse, but anything that would fit into that category. You don't want it to be a sob story, because if it's a sob story, then they're going to think that you faked it, thinking you're going to get into the school, because people do it. Any example I give you is because people do it. So people write fake sob stories about this terrible thing that they went through, and it is not true. So they have trouble believing the ones that are true. You also, that's not authentic about you. That's something you went through. Now, if you want to talk about something you learned through this situation, then absolutely. If it is a personal growth thing that you learned through this, that you've been able to develop this skill, then that is good. Working hard in a challenging class. Everyone has a class that was hard that they had to work hard in. Even if it was home ec, they have a class that they had to work hard. Everyone has,
Sorry.
and you don't want to introduce yourself as I had trouble in this subject either, because I work really hard for my math. I'm proud I work hard for my math. No one is discounting that, but I'm not going to introduce myself to the college as it took me 3 tries to pass pre-algebra. That's not the first thing I want them to learn about me. And so many people are going to write about it because they think that that is what people want to hear. The AP class that they had to join extra study groups for. Everyone has something. And it really can be. It can be something as simple as they have an issue in art. It's not a unique story. Now, again, if you've done something above and beyond, if you personally started a study group and you found resources and you were teaming up with teachers, that would be something to write about. But if you're just going to say, I studied, I did flashcards, I had my mom quiz me, and people do it, we don't want to do that because it is not going to stand out. You want something that's going to make you stand out. Number 5, someone you admire. You don't want to write about somebody else. It is very hard to write about someone you admire without it becoming about them. If you want to grow up and to be just like your mama, do it. Good for you. I'm proud of you. You do not want to write about it because it's not about you. You're introducing yourself, not Mahatma Gandhi. I have people every time that are like, but what about Gandhi? It's always, what about Gandhi? No one is saying that he didn't do good things, but it's not about him. You get 650 words. We'll talk about that in a second. You get 650 words to talk about you. You don't want to waste them talking about somebody else. Volunteer trips. We do not want to sound like we think that we saved everybody. Even with the best intentions, if you write about volunteering, it tends to come off as prideful, as I'm better than these people. You talking about feeding the homeless in Atlanta, which I've taken part in a lot in my lifetime, but talking about that makes you sound like you're trying to be a savior. It's very hard to write it where it doesn't sound like that, where it's, if without us, they would not have been able to eat anything. And it's hard to tell the tone when you're, it's like a text message. It's hard to tell the tone. And if I read it, I would think, oh, they think they're the only reason these people ate today. They went one day and they think that this did it. So volunteer is really one you have to be careful with. Now, I've had a girl who volunteered at the zoo, and she talks about the leadership position that she got and what that taught her. And then she went to Costa Rica, and she was working with a sanctuary out there. She wrote about it because that is something cool that people are not saying. I got to spend 3 weeks in Costa Rica working with rehabilitated animals. All right, moving and immigrating. Everyone has felt like they are not fitting in. So that's pretty much the crux of all of those, is the culture was different, the food was different. I had to learn how to get from here to there. Anyone who has ever moved from one state to another is going to write about it. Immigrating, same way. We are a land of immigrants, and and that's the majority of who I work with is 1st and 2nd generation immigrants. And they all could have the exact same story if I didn't say that they can't do that, because there are similar themes. It is that you didn't fit in. It's that you had to get confidence, all of those things. So other people are going to be writing about it. You don't want to. Your religious institution or faith, you don't know their biases. We don't know their prejudices. We don't want to say that I am a proud member of this United Methodist Church and I believe this, and this because God said so. And then you get that person. And this is just the reality of where it is. People cannot set aside their own biases. And so you just don't know who it is. Now, again, if there's something that you're going to show about your personal growth, if you're going to talk about a leadership position that you had at the church, If you're going to talk about a time that you helped do something and it showed you whatever, you could do that, but you don't want to just talk about it just generally. Romantic relationships and breakups. Don't do it. Don't do it. Don't do it. Don't embarrass me. I will tell them I told you no. Also, do not write about illegal activity. Goes under that same category. Romantic relationships and breakups makes you sound like an overdramatic teenager. You don't want to be that one. You don't want to be the one that they go, well, she can't come here because she is already worried about leaving this boy behind. Illegal activity, it may make a really good story. I may happen to know something about that. It may be a really good story, but that does not mean that's how you want to introduce yourself to this college, as you were committing illegal acts. Even if you learned something in the process, we don't want to introduce ourselves that way. And then the last one can be an issue because a lot of people are going to school for things that their parents have told them to go to school for because it's what they went for. And we don't want to do that. And we definitely don't want to write about it because they're just going to see that we shouldn't let him in because he doesn't want to be here anyway. And I've had students do it where I had to tell them, you cannot write a whole paragraph about how you really don't care about computer science, but your family does computer science and they want you to do computer science. There is no benefit. There is not a single benefit of it. They're not going to go easier on you, nothing. All right, I know that was a lot of them, but you got to keep it in your mind. It can sink an essay. All right, so we are going to look at a pad that we're not going to spend a long time on it, but I'm going to send out this tiny URL. It's also if you want to do it on your phone, because I know how y'all are. So you have your QR code. And what we're going to do is we're going to do some brainstorming. I'm going to try to skip that without that doing that, but did it anyway. All right. So what I've done is I have made a shelf for each of the categories. I want you to brainstorm and write down, it doesn't have to be for all of them. I did all of them to have so that you could have an example, and these are my real examples. I want you to think of some ideas that you could use. Maybe something pops to your head immediately. Maybe it's something that hadn't happened to you, but you think it could be a good idea for somebody else. There are all sorts of things. So I just want to use this so that we can do a little bit of brainstorming. And while you're working on that, I'm going to talk a little bit about mine so I can tell you where these would go, because sometimes it's kind of hard to see where this whole process is going to go. So for sharing your story, I could write about being a single mom. I could write about being a small business owner. I could write about the fact that I work multiple jobs. I could write about the fact that I just bought 14 acres and what my plans are to do on them. That one's my favorite.
Yeah, I want to hear that one.
if that was my prompt, that's the one I would do. But those are things that have affected my life that I have learned from and that I plan to keep learning with. And so that is the kind of stories you want. You want the ones that you're gonna have trouble keeping in the word limit because it is something that you care that much about. Learning from obstacles. So I've had some health diagnoses lately that I have been having to deal with. I've had to change my diet. I'm having to go see some specialists. And so I'm learning from this. I'm learning a lot from this. I am relearning. I'll say that I am relearning how to care for my body. That's an obstacle that I was having these health issues. And I am learning more about nutrition, and I'm learning more about my body specifically because I've done genetic testing. That is something that you could write about. Challenging a belief. I am a woman working in a technology field, which we're getting more and more women in the technology field, but I have been in many a room and many a Zoom call and many a meeting that I am the only woman there. So I could write about that, and how I have had to, I've had to correct some mansplaining and things. So that would be something that I could talk about, that I challenge that belief. First of all, I'm challenging my own belief, because I wasn't raised that this was a normal profession for women. But also I have to prove it to other people. Small business, same kind of thing. It's a lot of men in that room. I have been lucky to find some groups of people that aren't. Solving a problem. My students were failing. I had a certain amount of students that were failing. And so I started study hall. Problem, solution. I'm going to be able to use that in the future. This is a test run of larger things that we could put on as an event for PLI, because this is a current thing that I'm doing. But it shows the problem and how I solved it. Now, personal growth. Let me tell you about my personal growth. I don't ask for help. I know it. And it is something that I have been working on over the past few years, really since the pandemic started. Because again, single mom, teacher, I don't have enough hands. I don't. So I am working on asking for help. And it was something I had trouble doing at all. I can now do it some, but I know how much better I'm going to get about it later. And I can write about what my plans are. Who am I going to ask for help? So that is how you show personal growth. It is going up those stairs. And then what captivates you? Quilting. Quilting, sustainability, technology in the classroom, curriculum. Look, I love things. I know that I love things. And that would be one that would be so fun to write about. Because you get to tell why. It's all about the why, how and why. All right, so.
These are great. I think, so are you saying that should they try to put something for each prompt, or just kind of ones that stand out to them? What do you recommend?
Ones that stand out to them. If you've got an idea, I want you to put it on here. So I'm actually going to collapse this so we can keep going. Okay. And this is something that you're still going to have access to. And that way people can feed off each other a little bit. If you have an idea that you like, and it's so funny, I work with students and I don't know their life. I know, this much of their life. And I throw out examples of things that with that little bit I can tell. And they're like, you're right. I do that. I'm like, I know, I can tell. And that would be a good story. So that would also be helpful to talk about other people. But it's also good for examples. So if you ever just want to come back and look at some examples, so I'm going to have people keep adding to this. Y'all can keep adding to this. I have to brain dump. I have to write my thoughts down or babble them out. I'm a talker. You can tell I'm a talker. I do the same thing with typing because I'm a writer. So this is going to stay active.
Okay, that's great.
That way, especially if you're watching the recording right now, you can still come in and jump in when it's a recording.
Yeah, I was gonna put a couple up too, but then I was like, wait, I needed some time to think about this. So
that's why we're not going to sit on it, because if we sit on it, we won't get anywhere. And once you get started, it's so amazing how you start just turning them out. Once you get, it's all about your mindset. It's about this growth mindset and opening your mind up. And once you start thinking about how can I show me off, you have all the ideas in the world. I started having trouble, and then I was like, well, duh. And I just started type. Great. All right. So there is that. And then I want to talk about some tips and tricks. We're also going to do some practice together. I want to make sure we have time for this. So I put together what me and my coworkers for this company we've gotten down to, like, these are our must-haves. You have to remember, this is your first impression. This is a job interview. It's just for a school. They don't do an interview. This is your interview. So don't think that just because I wrote enough words that it's going to get you into school, because they're going to look at it and they're going to say, she's got nothing to add to this conversation. He is too scared to come over here even. I've had students who wanted to write about how scared they were to go to college. And I was like, again, no benefit. Telling them about how scared you are to live on your own, no benefit. It's a good for you story. I mean, know yourself. I am all for it. Not everything is for now. Not everything goes in this essay. So that is, and that's, all those things I said, don't talk about. That's all that, like, you don't want to talk about your breakup because it's your first impression. I think of it as your application is your handshake when you enter into the interview. And then this is your first interview. There are some other parts of this. So there's other parts of this interview. So you always want to make sure you're making a great first impression. Number 2, I love y'all dearly. Do not type it on your phone. If you need to idea dump, absolutely. I had a girl who tried to write her entire essay on her phone just because she wanted to. And she could not figure out anything. She got stuck. And I said, we can't see the whole thing. If you can't see the big picture, then how are you going to do this? Also, it's going to autocorrect words that it might autocorrect them to something that you may not want to say to the college. Especially if it's something you've taught your phone to say so you can tell your friends. And I'm just brutally honest, you don't want to say a uh-oh word because your phone thought that's what you were saying. It also makes it confusing with the formatting. It makes it confusing with the organizing. It's hard to follow an outline if you are on a phone, because you're just going to write words and you're going to think you wrote a lot because your whole screen is going to be covered, and that's 2 sentences. So do not write it on a phone. Save yourself the time, because you'll have to go back and basically redo it if you do it. Always have specific examples and stories. Don't say something you can't back up. This is your citing your evidence for this paper. Your specific examples. If I wrote about quilting, I'm going to tell the specific story about my first quilt that I worked on with my mom, which was for my sister's graduation present, and all of our family got involved, and everyone put at least a handful of stitches in, and I'm going to tell this story. I'm not just going to say, I love quilting and I'm really good at it and I've been quilting most of my life. All of those are empty sentences. They did not say anything that was worth wasting words. You only get 650 of them, so you don't want to waste them. I call it spending your words, and you want to spend your words wisely. Practice. Do not just jump into this thing. Write some practice ones first about even other topics. Maybe don't even look at the prompts. I tell people don't look at the prompts until you're ready to do the thing, because you need to do your brainstorming first, and we're going to look at that too. Timeline. Know when the deadline of when it's due. Have it done at least 2 weeks beforehand. 2 weeks. Because that gives you time to sit on it and just let it be and feel good about it. You have time. Take it. Don't take it as in just not doing it. Take it as in, I am actively doing these steps of a paper that I know I have to do. I'm doing my pre-writing. I'm doing my rough draft. I'm doing a revision. I'm doing another revision. I'm doing another revision. Things that you get away with not doing, you can't get away with this because they are looking for top notch. So something that could have gotten 100 just because your teacher was tired of grading them all because she has 246 students will not just get you into college. I called those thank you for participating grades. when I'm like, this was just some writing practice and I'm not going to go through and edit and look at all of these. So make sure you set up your timeline and stick to it. Put it in your Google Calendar. Have an accountability partner, your parent, an English teacher, another friend who's also applying to things. Have someone that you are accountable to make sure you actually stick to your deadlines. That is just boiled down right there of all the things that I have to say over and over and over and over again. There are other things I could say. So trust me on these. Don't be the kid who says, but I always type my papers on my phone and I always do such a good job. Don't risk it. Do not risk it. And then when you're done with your draft, run it through Grammarly. I will tell my students always like, I thought that was cheating. It absolutely is not. As long as it is your content, your words, and you were just letting them help you fix some of your commas, that's not a big deal. The last one I want to talk about, because this is important, I should have put it in the last one. Only have one editor. People have opinions and they're not all right. I'd say the phrase of it, that's not appropriate for right now. Have one trusted editor. Have them agree to be your editor, and they're the only one you go to. Don't have your mom, your English teacher, your youth pastor, your great aunt who you see every 3 years, or one person. Because when you get more than one person in, everything contradicts and not everyone knows what they're doing. Just because they're your mama does not mean that they know how to do this paper. If they do not have that background, do not let them help you. I've had some arguments this past summer about that, where I said, one of us is a professional getting paid to do this, and the other one is the person who paid for it to get done. So,
does it matter who you pick to be your editor? How should they go back? How should we go about selecting our editor?
So here's what I'm going to say. I would pick someone who has some kind of experience with writing. It doesn't necessarily have to be writing these kinds of essays, but someone who is a strong writer. And you'll usually know who these people are because they're usually writing, and you see them do it all the time. And they send emails that are this long and text messages that are this long. People know to bring their stuff to me because they know that words are my jam. So make sure it is also someone who is not just going to be biased. Do not have someone who loves you too much to do it, because they're not going to call you out on your mistakes. That's why I put, and it's one of the reasons why I put the links to, if you want like one-on-one coaching with somebody, there's 2 different companies that I put it up for. One's the one I work with, and one is one that we do some training with. Because an outside person is going to tell you the truth. They do not have rose-colored glasses on. So carefully choose your editor. Mm-hmm. If you have a counselor or a teacher who's willing to do it, then that's great. But just know that they're also doing a lot of other people's. Ask around. If you go to church, ask around your church. If you have like family members, ask them. Anyone that can look at it and give you honest feedback. But I always suggest, now I know that's not always financially possible. If you can get a writing coach for it, it does make a difference. Especially as we're seeing ACT and SAT not always being taken into consideration for some of these colleges. Mm-hmm. Especially if you're looking at going to like a private college. All right. So I've given you some resources, and again, I'm going to keep adding stuff because this is what I do. So the first one I want to just show you, because it's just one that you just have access to. Let's look at this one first. And you can make whatever copies you need to make. So I've linked Common App, which is the one that is accepted by most colleges. I have put the link to the prompts for this year. They were the same for last year. I cannot swear to you that they will be the same next year, but it's a high probability that they will be. There's only so much you can change a prompt about personal growth. Some schools also have their own requirements. They may have PIQs, which is personal insight questions, which are like 300, 350 word little like constructed responses. They also may have extra essays you have to do. They're called supplemental essays. So you need to know, if you know now, I want to apply to these colleges. If you go to that link, you can see if Common App already knows that they require something extra. You also can always email someone in admissions at that college, because they're usually pretty good, especially if you just ask a real simple question. They're pretty good about answering, like, we do accept this, or we recommend this. College Essay Guy is, I use a lot of his resources. There's a few of them that I do, but he's one of them. He has online courses. If you want to do a class, but you can't do like a live one-on-one, or you want to be in a group, he has online classes for students, and teachers and counselors, and I think parents. So that's something to look into. He has some free resources. Isn't that a thing?
Yeah, that's great.
So I'm about to do one of his. So you have free resources. So a lot of those articles like answers to common questions. And they also have a one-on-one coaching service. Now, I work for a company called UC Easy. They are based out of California. And I am not telling you that you should go to them because I work there, because I'm not that person. I will always be honest with you. Authenticity is the name of the game. They have counselors that can help you go through your college search, can help you with your career research, and they'll also hook you up with a writing coach. Now, you do have to pay for it, but I will tell you, it is worth the money if you can. And if you can't, that's why I'm giving you as much as I can of my stuff, all of my templates and things. That way you at least have that. But if you can, those are good programs. So that's just something have in the back of your mind as you're thinking about things. All right, and then I have given you a brainstorming sheet. These are the activities that I do over like the first month, let me say month, with my students before we even look at the prompts. Because what is more important is to know what you want to tell them and make it fit the prompt. You don't want to have to find something to go with a prompt. So I've also put all of these here. So I wanted to point out, so it's on the Padlet, but it's also here. So if you would like to take some notes for yourself, that's on there. The top one is, what are the top 5 things you would want someone to know about you? If you could tell someone 5 things when you walked in the door, and that's all you can say, what would you want to tell them? Is it that you're consistent? Is it that you're meticulous? Is it that you are optimistic? But you have to have a specific example. So what I would do before you even, we're going to look a little at the prompts, but before we look at the prompts, and before you really work with them, you're going to want to do this, because it is so much better to know what you want to tell them and then make it fit a prompt, because they're very vague prompts about personal growth in a challenging time. So you can always make something work. I also like having people think about, how would someone else describe you? Because getting out of your own head is often really helpful with this. So like if your friends would say that you're a great organizer and you're the one who organizes y'all's hangout Zoom call, I've got a student that does that, then write that down. Use that. I'm organized. Example, me and my friends have a Zoom call every Monday at this time, and I'm the one that's in charge of making sure everyone gets there. And then this one is honestly probably one of the, I don't want to say it's the most important. These are all important. This is called 21 details, is what this activity is called. So you list 21 random and interesting facts about yourself, because you wouldn't believe the cool things that you come up with that you can make work in an essay. I had a boy who ended up writing his essay about how he built a ukulele. It was one of his random facts. And I said, there's no reason for us not to use that.
That is random, but very cool.
He also had his grandfather's the one who named him, and his name means, I think it means name in his language, his home language. And so it's a name that means name, and because the granddaddy got to pick his name. People come up with stuff like weird foods that they like, but the story is why they like it. Why do you like peanut butter and banana sandwiches? Because that's what my grandma made when I was little, and I would stay at her house while my mom went to work. And that's a story that you can expand. So these are just jotting down 21 random things. I highly suggest it. We have gotten so many essay prompts, like essay topics off of that list. Maybe you are one of so many children, but you're the only one that has XYZ. Things that make you you. And since you have 21, they don't all have to be important. It can be Skittles are my favorite candy. Because you may be able to work that in somewhere. You just never know. I use this as a catalog. I make when my students are stuck, I say, go back to 21 details. Find something that's going to help you. So the first 9 are easy. I'll say the first 9 exactly is easy. And then you're going to have to start thinking hard, but then it's the last ones that are the cool ones. It's not just I'm this child in my family. Woo, okay, going quick. I told you I'm trying to smush like a whole semester of work into this hour.
It's great. It's all good information.
So I've also given you my outline template because this essay is so much different than any other essay you've ever written. Now, while it does follow some of the general things that you normally would follow, you still have your topic sentence where it goes. It is even more important on this one to have good transitions, an explicit transition where you can obviously see I was trying to get from here to here, because you have a short essay, and if it's choppy, that's not going to read well. You want your reader to enjoy your paper. So what I say to do is, so it says example, but what that really means is those specific stories. So I would have your example or story. I would have 2 of them, and then have another sentence, because these can each be 1 sentence, explaining that one. I have had students write their whole essay by putting this in full sentences when they made this. And in the end, they were able to just copy paste it over because this was already set up so that you just do 1 sentence per topic sentence. Example, details. Think about it. Topic sentence, example, details, transition. That's a 6-sentence paragraph. You don't need to do more than that. So I have it as 3 paragraphs because that usually works the best. But yeah, so there's that. Okay. We already talked about that. Okay. Okay. So here's the prompt. So here's the thing. You get a 650 word limit on the Common App prompt. Even if you're not doing one for Common App, if you're just doing any like admissions or scholarship, 650 is usually about what they want from you. 650 is a weird number of words. And it's going to be hard to do it because you're going to want to go over. Because by the time that you've written up to that many words, you realize that you're only 2/3 into your story. That's why the outline is important. We make the words count. We spend our words wisely. So for example, like I said, most of these you can make work. Some students have a background, identity, interest, or talent that is so meaningful they believe their application would be incomplete without it. If this sounds like you, please share your story. Just about anything you could possibly write can fit into that. So avoid number 7. Pretend he's not there. I was about to say, I may even strike him out later, just to remind you.
Yeah.
Strike through. So I've given you the link to the Common App website and those couple of resources, but there are other resources here. There's even some teacher ones, which for parents that can also be helpful. And then it's also got some just getting ready to go to college. What is it going to cost? How can you fund it? How are you going to get there? So that's very important. I've also put all this. So this is the college essay guide. So they have a free guide to writing your personal statement. They have courses. They have these services, that one-on-one that I was talking about. That's that college essay coaching. They also have the college counseling. So there's that. Okay. The biggest thing is your brainstorming, your pre-writing is more important than ever on this assignment. You may never have done an outline. You may never do a web. You may never do it for anything else. You need to do it for this one. Get your ideas down. Do that brainstorming worksheet, and then pick your thing and write it on your outline. If you don't, you're going to get stuck. You're going to spin your wheels until you don't turn it in. And there's deadlines. So you've got to make sure that you are chugging right along. Again, if you need help, send me an email, because I have no problem tossing some ideas out. We can't do a full-fledged thing, but I could at least help you a little bit with some of that if you just really are not sure what any of this means.
Yeah, that's excellent advice. Well, thank you so much. We really appreciate you coming on here and sharing all of this expert information. And, definitely, as if we see more ideas for high school students come in, we'll definitely get those going. And, we hope to see you guys at more events in the future.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, have a nice evening, guys. Thank you for participating.